Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me. And we're starting. Jody Morgan moved to our street in the house across the street when she was 14 years old. For a 15-year-old boy, it was love at first sight. There was no nice introduction. From the very beginning, it seemed that we were destined to be together forever. But enough of the sentimentality. What really connected us was our shared love of adventure. We constantly had to do something, not some everyday things, but extraordinary ones. As a child, it started with things like climbing very tall trees or exploring caves, diving from local bridges and painting water towers. Nothing seemed to be off limits as long as it remained within the law, although a lot of it was walking on the edge, if you know what I mean. Her favorite expression was, "You always regret what you didn't do." We barely managed to finish high school without killing ourselves. I graduated first and got a good job laying bricks. Our school had a construction training program, and I took full advantage of it. Jody graduated from high school a year later. She completed a nursing training program and was quickly recruited by one of the local ambulance services. 6 months later, Jody Morgan became Mrs. John Terrell. Our extracurricular activities have slowed down a lot, but they have not disappeared. The excitement that we lacked outside the house, we made up for in the bedroom. As for love, everything was on the menu. We worked hard. We saved up money and bought a house. After the birth of our third son, Jody quit her job. Life was good. I had 6 people working for me, and there was more work than we could handle. Only one problem still existed. Jody began to feel sorry. "John, we have to do something." "With what? Everything seems to be fine. Are the boys all right?" "The boys are fine for now. I'm worried about us. We're stuck. If we don't start doing something, we'll take root and we won't be able to move anymore." "That's a damn exaggeration, but I understand what you're trying to say. Any suggestions?" "The boys are 8, 9, and 10 years old. I think they're old enough to do this with us. We'll have to adapt a bit to connect them, but I think it could be fun. It doesn't have to be permanent, but we have to do something. I don't want them to regret not doing something when they were young. We didn't regret it." Jody didn't appreciate it when I started laughing. "What the hell is so funny here, John? You sound the same as you did 20 years ago. Is this the legacy you're going to leave your sons?" "Why not? I think it would be a good idea to instill this in them. I don't want them to grow up like logs." "Is that all?" "No, I want it for myself too. There are a hell of a lot of things we haven't done yet. We can afford it and we have time. Your guys can cover for you when you need to leave." "Okay, I agree." Lighting up. Is that what they're saying now? For the next couple of years, we were constantly on the move. It wasn't continuous, but it was fairly regular. When one trip was over, Jody was already planning the next one or two. We all enjoyed rafting on mountain rivers, and this opened several doors for us. We made 2 trips to the border waters in Minnesota. We tried bungee jumping and zip lines. As a result, we got 5 kayaks. After receiving scuba diving certificates, even more opportunities opened up for us. We tried to fly in a hot air balloon, but found it boring. Jody and I did a tandem skydive. 10 years have passed. Terry, our eldest son, joined the Air Force. Greg became a scuba diving instructor, and Robert, the youngest, became a long-distance truck driver. Jody and I were left alone. Everything seemed to slow down. I spent more time at work, and Jody spent more time on the internet. Jody went back to work. Everything was quiet for several months. "John?" "Yes." "I'm starting to get a little worried." "What exactly does that mean?" "I have something to do." "There are a lot of things at work right now. Maybe it can wait a bit." "I think so. Actually, I thought maybe, for a change, I could do something on my own." "You mean alone?" "Not really. I thought maybe with one of the girls from work. I've never gone anywhere without you, so it will be at least some variety." "Is there anything specific in mind?" "No. Sarah and I have talked about it for a while, but we haven't decided anything yet." "Is this Sarah Harlow?" "Yes, you've seen her at some picnics." "Is this the one who got divorced twice?" Jody hesitated. "Yes, but that's not a problem." "Why would that be?" "I'm sorry, I thought you'd be judging. Just because she's divorced doesn't make her a bad person." "I never said that, and I'm sorry if that's how you interpreted it." "So you don't mind?" "Of course. Have I ever denied you anything?" Thank you. I was uneasy. All the trips and vacations that Jody planned were somehow connected with her mantra. I knew that. I just needed to understand how it applied in this case. She will do something so that she doesn't regret not doing it later. There's a lot of negativity out there. All I had to do was figure out what she was going to do. The business has developed well over the years. In addition to laying bricks, we also did a lot of block masonry and poured concrete foundations. We didn't make driveways or sidewalks, just foundations and wall fill. The company was also engaged in the construction of buildings made of steel structures. They were usually simple prefabricated buildings, but some of them were quite large. Now I had more than 50 full-time employees. I never asked Jody what she was planning. The fact that she didn't openly say what it would be caused me some concern. I'm sure she had something on her mind. My fears were greatly increased when I discovered that she deletes the browser history every time. I think most guys would have had no trouble getting around this problem, but I wasn't that smart. I didn't even know what a keylogger was. She also deleted her email correspondence, but then she screwed up. Jody sent her emails to the trash, but she didn't realize that they stay in the trash for 30 days if she doesn't empty the trash every time. I started going through her emails over the last month. Most of them were just junk, but the correspondence she had with Sarah was instructive. The words were enough to confirm my suspicions, but the accompanying web links completed the job. I did not check all the sites that were linked to. It was not necessary. It's time to make a decision that I won't regret. It was a Tuesday fair in Beach, and yes, it really was Tuesday. I felt like a new kid at school. It was my first time out, even though I had been here for 2 days. I wandered around for a while and finally found the coffee shop assigned to me. Being old school, I ordered a regular black coffee. It was still early and people were just starting to gather, so I took one of the still vacant seats. I felt weird wearing a New York Yankees baseball cap, but that was one of the conditions set for me. "Hey, the new guy. Welcome to Buke. You must be Mickey, right?" My greeter was also wearing a Yankees cap. I kind of half stood up to greet him, but he motioned for me to sit back down and did the same. "Ted Williams. I am always glad to meet a ball-playing friend." He shook my hand vigorously. We both had a little laugh at the inappropriate reference to the ball player. I thought it was a joke, but I had a feeling that a lot of people knew about it. "How many players are we talking about?" "At the moment, it looks like there are 10 baseball players and 3 tennis players." "Tennis?" "The baseball players are all guys, but there are 3 other girls in the program, and Hector decided that tennis is more suitable for them." "Are they all here?" "All but one. Chris Everett lives in David." That's when Sandy Koufax and Bob Feller joined us. By the end of the morning, I had met 4 other famous ball players. Bob quickly got down to business. "So, Mr. Mickey Mantle, in 25 words, no more. Tell us why you decided to choose Panama Alternative Promotion?" From the way the question was phrased, I guessed that no one needed terrible details, just a brief overview. "My wife, with whom I have lived for 23 years, decided that she wanted to spread her wings, and I decided that I did not want to stand in her way. That's why I left." Yogi Bear was the first to respond. Yogi Bear is a Yogi Bear, a character in a popular American cartoon. It was more than 25 words. Ted poked him in the ribs with his finger. Over the next 20 minutes, each of the guys talked about the reasons for their participation in the program. They were almost all different, but the results were the same. 10 guys and 3 girls signed up for the PAP to avoid unwanted situations at home. It wasn't cheap and it wasn't infallible. Basically, we got a new name, a new driver's license, and a new bank account. Unfortunately, we were still U.S. citizens and had to pay taxes on our old names. All except Joe DiMaggio, who was originally from Canada. If someone really wanted to find us, they could do it. Translator's note: all the characters have received new names identical to the names of famous athletes. Hector Ruiz organized the Panama Alternative Promotion so that people in our position would have at least some option to disappear without going to extremes. It wasn't a black ops type system, in fact, it was quite free. Hector was an avid baseball fan. It wasn't exactly kosher, but it was greased up enough that we could feel comfortable. The name change was executed properly. The driver's license and bank accounts were in order. Using them was not easy, but it was quite feasible. It was almost noon when my cell phone rang. I haven't had time to buy a new one yet. The whole team watched me read the message. AIR Jamaica Flight 247 landed at Philadelphia International Airport from Montego Bay. I looked at my companions and smiled. "Gentlemen, my wife has just returned home from a 10-day vacation." That evening, we all went to the Rock to have some ribs. I spent the next few months getting to know the area. There was always 1 or 2 team members around to communicate and help. I notified all 3 boys of the situation, but without any details. Their mother could explain everything to them. Hector insisted that all PAP participants carry alarm suitcases with the most necessary things in case of a sudden departure. Both Barry Bonds and Willie Mays had to use their briefcases at some point. Barry was being tracked down by his exasperated wife, and Willie was being searched for by two brothers-in-law. They were more than happy to recommend items that I should have with me if necessary. The need arose sooner than I expected. The phone rang at 5 a.m. Who the hell would be calling at this hour? Mr. Mantle, this is Hector. The driver will be with you in 30 minutes. Prepare everything you need and be ready to stay at least a week, maybe longer. Don't say anything to anyone. I'll take care of everything. In fact, there wasn't much to do. I had enough time to shower and shave and still be ready to leave. Fortunately, the driver took some air reps with him. An hour later, we were in David. Chris Everett was waiting with an anxious suitcase when we arrived. I have no idea why she chose David over Boca. When we were driving south, the temperature was completely different. She didn't look like a tennis player at all. Of course, I didn't look like a baseball player either. She looked more like a Mediterranean type. We introduced ourselves and she began to get settled. She had already had breakfast and I ate her arepas. Do you have any idea where we're going? I shook my head. No. Do you know why? I pretended to be ignorant again. She had a dejected expression on her face and sat in silence for the rest of the trip. 30 minutes later, we arrived at a small marina. I had no idea where we were. I know absolutely nothing about sailboats. All I know is that the one we were on was of medium size. After unloading us and our bags, the driver smiled, waved, and drove away. The boat was called the Yankee Clipper. I thought it was ironic. The captain, Jaime Ruiz, was Hector's cousin. His assistant was a young local girl named Marisol. It turned out that he was steering the ship, and she was taking care of everything else. I had no idea what we were going to do or how much we would be charged for this service. But it didn't matter. Our belongings were packed in the back cabin, and we gathered on deck to drink coffee and eat some cookies. It was still too early for lunch. Jamie was proud to tell us about his Peterson 44. It didn't mean anything to me. Chris and I both acted like we were interested in it, wanting to please him. I looked at her a few times and it was easy to understand how she felt. However, he caught her attention when he mentioned that we would be living in the main cabin, and he and Marisol would be opposite. I'm sorry, but it doesn't suit me. She said it with all seriousness. I smiled and Jamie looked a little embarrassed. I don't even know this man and I don't intend to share a bed or even a room with him. You'll have to come up with something else. Jaime didn't have a quick answer, so I had to step in. Don't worry about it. I can use the main bathroom and it won't be difficult for me to sleep on a pull-out bed in the galley. I'm sure Miss Chris won't mind if I keep my bag in her room. Do you mind? After I said that, I realized that by using the expression Miss Chris, I had made a fool of myself. You need to be careful not to repeat this mistake in the future. Chris went downstairs to settle into her cabin while I wandered around the deck. Jamie and Marisol pushed off from the dock using an auxiliary engine. I had no idea where we were, and I had no idea where we were going, and I didn't care. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember was Marisol calling me to lunch. It looked like most of the dinners would be held on deck. That was fine with me. After a light lunch, Jamie opened a small tablet computer. Miss Everett, your ex-husband, Anthony Krupe, and several friends arrived in Panama City last night and rented a car this morning. All we know is that they asked the woman at the car rental point for directions to David. Chris sank into a chair, sighed, and said, "Damn." Mr. Mantle, your wife, Jody Terrell, arrived on the same flight from Philadelphia and also rented a car. We don't know anything else. Marisol, do you have a cold beer? I couldn't think of anything smarter. 30 minutes later, Jaime and Marisol were already hoisting the sails, and soon we were rushing at full speed into the open ocean. Chris spent the rest of the day downstairs while I lay on the deck, enjoying the sun and wind. And I still got my cold beer. For the next 3 days, everything was calm. I slept in the galley. Chris occupied the master bedroom, and Jaime and Marisol shared the forward cabin. I tried to be helpful, helping Jaime whenever I could. Chris helped Marisol, but she cooked some of the dishes herself. She was great at brunch-type dinners. No one complained. She seemed comfortable in the kitchen and in the hall. I spent most of my free time on deck except for the rain. It rained almost every day, but not all day. When we weren't sailing, Jaime would find some quiet coves and inlets to moor the boat for a while. I caught a few fish, but I had no idea what kind of fish they were. All I knew was that they were pretty tasty. Chris spent time on deck, but more often she usually wore a light blanket. She had a one-piece swimsuit that was modest and seemed a little old-fashioned to her. Unlike Jody, Chris was short and stocky. She wasn't fat, but she was pretty well fed. I found it interesting, but not erotic. You know, a little sun would help you keep that beautiful tan. It was a weak attempt on my part to be friendly. It's not a tan, you idiot. The sun ages the skin and is the main cause of melanoma. I'd rather cover up than look like an old woman with tanned skin. It was unexpected. Her skin had a golden sheen, and I just assumed it was from a normal tan. She must have really been Mediterranean. I'll try a different approach tomorrow. Everything was quiet and serene. Who am I kidding? It was boring as hell. By the end of the week, Chris had finally warmed up. The conversations were short and meaningless, but they were conversations. That evening after dinner, we were on deck and she decided to open up a little. Mickey, why are you here? What made you sign a contract with the PAP? Since I decided to live in David and not in Boca, I feel a little out of place. You all know each other up there. It should work both ways. Let's just say that. You tell me your story and I'll tell you mine. But first I need to know one thing. Yes, what is it exactly? What's your real name? We're not supposed to talk, but to hell with it. My name is Carla. Great. You can call me John. It's funny for me to respond to Mickey. Carla reached into the fridge and got us both a new bottle of beer. I won't bore you with a long story. I got married about 8 years ago in Westchester to the son of an old family friend. I think you could call it a marriage of convenience, although technically it wasn't. My family was well off, and so was his family. Unfortunately, I couldn't have children, so my husband decided that he needed to find someone else. Should I continue? I smiled, nodded, and took a sip of beer. My family, Randazzo, was engaged in municipal construction. They serviced all traffic lights, street lights, storm drains, and other similar projects in 3 counties. It was very profitable. The Krupi family owned 4 restaurants, several pizzerias, and sandwich shops. How did you end up here? My husband Tony just informed me that he's having a baby with his last girlfriend. He was going to move her to our house while she was pregnant, and after the baby was born, they would find a more suitable place to live. He seemed very confident in himself. He's always been like that. She brought us 2 more cold ones. I smiled and waited for her to continue. I burned down the house as well as 3 cars. Then I burned down the largest of Krupi's restaurants, and finally cleaned out all bank accounts, including savings and investments. 2 days later, I was here. We sat in silence for a few minutes, enjoying our beer. All right, John, now it's your turn. My wife Jody and I met when we were kids. We grew up together and got into trouble all the time. She enjoyed every minute of it. Her mantra was, "You always regret what you don't do," and that's how she lived. Over time, we got married and had 3 children. I started my own construction business, which was developing very well. At every opportunity, we did something adventurous and exciting. When the children grew up, she became bored, and she decided to arrange one of her own adventures. The nature of the project she chose meant that I couldn't go with her, and also, unfortunately, she couldn't discuss it with me. Carla handed me a new cold beer. I think I see where this is going. I'm not a computer genius, but it wasn't difficult for me to figure it out. It bothered me a lot. I do not know which was worse, knowing what she was going to do, or knowing that she was keeping it a secret from me. We've been sharing everything all our lives, and now it was going to happen. I take it you waited for her to leave before you finished everything? Yes. I transferred my business to my employees in exchange for a share of future profits and took a good chunk of our savings, but not all. I left her the house and everything else. Are you sure she did what you think she did? No, I don't want to know, and I don't need to know more than I know. I don't need this grief. Have you heard anything about her since then? Nah. We sat in silence for a while, and then Carla excused herself and went to bed. That night I slept on the deck. The next day some kind of storm broke out. By dinner it got really bad. Jamie and Marisol spent quite a lot of time setting up ropes, anchors, or something similar to prepare for the night. They seemed to know what they were doing, so I felt calm. All I could think about were the words from an old Queen song. Thunder and lightning, very, very scary. Galileo, Galileo. I don't know which was worse, bright flashes of lightning or loud thunderclaps. It was hard to fall asleep, and the fact that Carla kept shaking me didn't help. What the hell do you want? It's a really big storm, John. Come down to the cabin with me, quickly. It's all right, I'm fine. Don't worry about me, go back to bed. I'm not worried about you, asshole. I'm worried about myself. Get your ass in the cabin now. She was tugging at my arm. I spent the rest of the night hugging her. Most of the time, she pulled the blanket over her head. By the next morning, everything was quiet and peaceful. I woke up with my chest in my hand and a furious boner. She seemed to have woken up and was aware of both conditions, but did not know what to do, and just lay motionless. As smoothly as I could, I pushed my ass back and took my hand away. I had no idea how it ended up under her nightgown. When we settled down on the bed, she turned to face me. Thank you, John. I needed it. She slid off the bed and went into the control room. I had no idea what she meant. I heaved myself over the side of the bunk with relief. Carla was very friendly for the rest of the day. Jamie and Marisol enjoyed making us feel awkward about our night together. The comments and banter didn't stop all day. In fact, Carla seems to have given it a reason herself a couple of times. I was more confused than she was. In the evening, after a few beers on deck, Carla took my hand and we went to the cabin together. We hardly slept that night. It was a new experience for me. My first woman besides Jody. It was different and at the same time the same. It's hard to describe, but I really enjoyed it. I didn't feel any guilt. Unfortunately, it was also our last night aboard the Yankee Clipper. On the way home, our driver gave us the latest news. It looks like Jody left Boca after a week and returned home. Carla's husband, however, simply disappeared along with his two companions. They found a rented car in the middle of nowhere, but without passengers. We dropped Carla off at her apartment, and I was home an hour later. The first person I met the next morning was Billie Jean King. She spent most of the week with Jody while I was away. Jody spent a couple of days showing my picture all over the city. It didn't take her long to realize that I was Mickey Mantle now. Except for the guys from the PAP, no one hid anything about me. They just didn't have any information to give her other than my address. When she realized I wasn't coming back, she gave up and left. She didn't say much, but she told Billie Jean that I left because she screwed up. That's all she said. It doesn't really sound like an explanation, but then again, it was secondhand. However, if she really thought so, then my leaving was the right choice. For the next few months, everything went pretty well, except that I spent 2 or 3 days a week in David, and Carla spent a couple of days a week in Boca. There has never been a deep emotional attachment between us. It was just a good friendship. In the end, she decided that I wasn't going to move to David, and she found us a bigger and better apartment in Boca, and we teamed up. Carla decided to take up watercolor painting, and I took up sports seriously. So serious that Willie Mays, Sandy Koufax, and I decided to open our own gym, so to speak, a gym. It was a fun little project. A whole group of expats in the area had unused exercise machines that were idle. It's funny how people buy these things without realizing that they don't help if they're not used. In a short time, we had more simulators than we needed. More than half of them did not match the level of the gym, and in the end, we had to throw them away. No one seemed offended by this. They just wanted to get rid of them. Monica Silas was very glad that we opened up and she could start yoga and Zumba classes. We charged a small monthly fee to cover rent, utilities, and insurance. Things were going well at the gym, and Carla was delighted with her painting. However, everything else was not so rosy. The PAP turned into a ball of worms. Hector did his best to make everything work, but it was too difficult. Several guys had problems with their passports. The tax situation was confusing. In addition, the difficulties with banking operations could confuse anyone. After several group meetings, it was decided to abandon the program. Everyone agreed except Joe DiMaggio. Hector agreed to make an exception for him. It took a couple of weeks, but eventually everyone had a new driver's license and bank accounts. Our old passports were still in order. The only drawback now was that it would be easier to find us now. We still had Hector as our legal advisor and trustee. We also kept our alarm cases, just in case. A year has passed and I didn't even notice it. The checks were still coming in every month. They were different in amount, but always more than enough. The good thing was that Carla had a lot more money than I did, and she wasn't stingy. We lived a good life and didn't need anything. I haven't had any contact with Jody or my sons since the last time I called them. The next 6 months were quite active. One day I came home and saw Carla sitting on the porch with a stranger. Michael Randazzo came from Westchester to spend a week with his daughter. They haven't spoken since she left. Her mother couldn't come because of heart problems. I felt a little uneasy, but he quickly calmed me down. He was sincerely grateful that his daughter was happy and being taken care of. I was a little uneasy, especially since I was almost 20 years older than her. Over the next week, Michael and I spent several hours together. He apologized for letting the problem with Carla's husband get out of control. He never said it, but I got the idea that Anthony Krupe had never returned to the States and would never return. I didn't ask for an explanation. It was his monkey and his circus. He tried to get the charges against Carla dropped, but to no avail. He also asked me about my marital status and seemed genuinely interested in my answer. The week passed quickly. Carla was happy, and it only made me feel better. Before leaving, he took me aside. "John, Carla needs to see her mother. She can't come back as Carla Krupe, but she can do it as Carla Terrell. Think about it." I interpreted this as his approval. 6 weeks later, I got another surprise. My son Greg showed up. "You're hard to find, Dad, but not impossible. I'm sorry for not keeping in touch, but I assume you know the situation." "Actually, Dad, none of us know. We've all tried, but Mom refuses to tell us anything. She just says it was her fault and nothing else. It's been over a year now, and I haven't heard from her. She showed up over a year ago, and I've been avoiding her the whole time she's been here. At that time, I was still too limp." "From what, Dad? Are you going to give us a hint?" "No, I've said too much already. Now what the hell are you doing here? Do you know where Boca del Toro is?" "Of course. It's about a 5-hour drive north of here." "Why?" "I bought 50% of the shares of the dive shop. I'm here to get all the paperwork done. I will move next month." "What's your mother doing?" "She was pretty depressed for a while. Then she found a new job. She works in the cafeteria of the elementary school. She tried to sell the house, but she couldn't without your signature. So she rented it out and rented an apartment. We talked to her about getting a better job, but she got upset and told us to mind our own business. Considering the rent she gets for the house and her salary, I think she's doing fine." At that moment, Carla came in. It was obvious that she lived here, and none of us thought to hide it. "Hello, you must be Greg. John talks a lot about you." Greg was surprised, and it showed on his face. Carla laughed. "It's okay, Greg. Just think of me as your father's housekeeper. Who wants a beer?" She could break the ice. Greg suddenly felt comfortable in this situation. We talked a little more, and then we went to dinner. Before Greg left for the States, I gave him a power of attorney so that Jody could sell the house. A month later, he returned to start his new business. I haven't had any contact with the business since I left. That was the plan. The checks kept coming, and I had no reason to stick my nose in it. After a few months, I noticed that my monthly contributions to the company had increased significantly. I left Gary Jones in charge of the company and felt it was time to test him. "Gary, this is John. Damn it. It's about time. You've been gone for almost 2 years. What's going on?" "I was going to ask you the same question. I saw a big jump in monthly checks and I was curious. Is there anything I should know about?" "A couple of months ago, we were visited by a company from Philadelphia called Empire Industries. Have you ever heard of them?" "Of course I've heard of them. Empire Industries was owned by the Randazzo family. All this was supposed to happen soon after I met Carla's father." "Yes, I've heard of them. I know one of the owners, Michael Randazzo. What happened that led to this?" "They explained to us that they had many different jobs that did not fit into their normal activities. They wanted to subcontract these works and asked if we were interested. We didn't see anything wrong with the offer, so we agreed to try it for 90 days. It worked great for us. We got a lot of new jobs in Chester and Montgomery counties, and I had to hire 12 more people. I also had to buy 3 more trucks and some other equipment. Is everything under control or do you need help?" "John, it's okay, but we'd like you to come back. I haven't had a day off since you left. I could use a week ashore." We both laughed a little at his suggestion. "Gary, let me think for a while. I'll call you back." I could hear him grinning on the other end of the line. "Gary, did Jody come in at all?" "To be honest, John, she's only been here once. About a week after you left, she showed up. I explained to her that you are no longer associated with the company, as you told me. I know she wanted to know more, but she couldn't bring herself to ask. She didn't cry or get upset. She looked a little sad. We never saw her again." That evening, I had a light but serious conversation with Carla, and she swore she didn't know anything about what her dad had done. However, she found it funny. Months passed and everything went well. I got a surprise at Christmas when Terry showed up. Greg shared everything with both of his brothers, but carefully hid most of it from his mother. Of course, she knew where I was, and I'm sure she suspected that Greg and I had gotten together since he was also in Panama. It's just that he never shared anything with her. and she never asked. Terry spent 2 days with Carla and me in Boca, and the rest of the time in Bocas del Toro with Greg. Greg promised to help him get retested for scuba diving while he was here. Terry brought 2 things that Jody wanted him to give to me. The first was a check for $210,000, my share of the sale of the house. It was her decision, not mine. The second thing was the final decision on the divorce. There was no letter, no explanation, no message, only 2 envelopes. When he left, I didn't have a message or a letter that he could pick up.